Thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. It's really a privilege to be here with all of you again. Thank you for having me. And I just want to add my personal thanks to those of you thanking Doris. As you can imagine, I deal with a lot of people who are looking for change. That's my job, is to work with people who want to change things and make things better. And I would say, I think it's safe to say that none of them is as fair and tough at the same time as Doris. She's a force of nature. I've called her that many times before, but she is such a strong advocate for you, but understands the context in which our society operates, understands real people's needs, and always has a solution to the problems that she poses. So thank you so much, Doris, for being such a wonderful partner on behalf of all of you. And to all of you, thank you so much. We're talking this morning on the traditional territory of many Indigenous people, and I just want to show my respect for their contributions to this province over many generations and the ongoing building of a relationship that is so important to the success of this province between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It's great to be here with you. J'espère que votre congrès a commencé de belle façon. Merci de m'avoir invité parmi vous. When I was here last year, I shared the news that my daughter Maggie had finished her final exams, that she was about to graduate from Ryerson's nursing program, which she did, and she's now... I asked her if she wanted me on the stage when she graduated, and she said it was okay for me to be there. She's now working as an emerge room nurse, and she's finding it challenging, but she's learning a ton from the other nurses that she works with, and she is very proud to be there. And every time we talk about her work, my appreciation, my deep appreciation for the long hours you put in, the emotional toll that your work takes, and your professionalism just expands. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do. But a thank you is, I know, not enough, and Doris would be the first to say that. And I'm in politics because I believe that government exists to do the things that we can't do by ourselves. That's why we have government. That's why we came together as human beings to create government, so we could do more collectively. And I think our healthcare system is a perfect example of that. We're working to put patients first in Ontario, and you are right there with us. Doris went through that list of things that you have been able to advocate for, and many of those things we have partnered with you on. The RNAO has been a strong advocate for providing more support for long-term care homes, for increasing the number of interprofessional teams and nurse practitioner-led clinics in Ontario, for prioritizing mental health and addiction support. And I just want to, I want to say that I had the privilege with Dr. Hoskins at the time, and actually Maggie came with me as well, of visiting the safe injection site at Moss Park. And you know, it was a real privilege, and I got a much better understanding of the work that was being done there. And we have tried very hard to work to make sure that there's a permanent legal option. And I'm someone who has grown up believing that laws have to change when it's time for them to change. And if we have to push them to change, then again, that's why I'm in politics. If I were in politics because I believed that every law needed to stay the same, then that would be not a good use of anyone's time or vote. I'm in politics because I believe that we need to find ways to make our society better. And this issue of safe injection services and the way we think about, treat, help people who are dealing with addictions and mental health, as often in combination, is, I think, the real frontier of health care right now. So I appreciate your advocacy on that and your help. You've advocated for a strategy to respond to the opioid crisis. You've advocated for action outside the system, and just as I said, in areas that we know are crucial to people's health, including the minimum wage and childcare, affordable childcare. You have been strong voices on those files. So I want to thank you for the leadership that you've shown. I want to thank you for being part of the partnerships that we are building. And I know John Fraser announced last night our government's support for the RNAO led smoking cessation program for Indigenous women and for new moms, and the joint proposal for a Centre of Excellence for wound care. And that, again, was one of your supports. And that, thank you. That wound care, the Wound Care Centre of Excellence is a real demonstration of partnership, because it was RNAO, it was the Mississauga, Lynn, the Trillium Health Centre, Woundpedia, and Canadian Wound Care. Yeah, so it was a multi-pronged partnership, and those aren't easy to put together, so thank you very much for leading the charge on that. So you're helping us figure out exactly what we need to do next to support you and to support the people who you care for. I'm willing to bet that you've already talked about, and you're pretty familiar with the way our budget lays out our next steps by making major investments in hospitals and in long-term care. Yesterday I was at Kensington Gardens to talk with seniors about the difference that it's going to make in Ontario. So we're adding another 30,000 long-term care beds over the next 10 years, and that's on top of 30,000 that we're already redeveloping. That's right. But importantly, we've committed to hiring one additional RN for each of the province's 627 long-term care homes. And that's on the way to, and in aid of, committing to reach a provincial average of 4 hours of direct daily care for every resident in long-term care, as you have advocated. You know, in Ontario, not just politicians, not just healthcare workers, but I would say across the population, we take pride in a universal healthcare system. I've always said that I think that our universal healthcare system is pretty definitional to who we are as Canadians and Ontarians. If you think of conversations with people from other places, particularly the United States, and we know that as it is so critical to us, it is probably the truest expression of our values of fairness and equality and compassion. It's what we believe in. Those values are core to it. And we know our hospitals and caregivers like you have been dealing and are dealing with a lot of different pressures. We know that. And we know that government needs to step up and work with you to address those. And some of those pressures are within our control. If we think about planning for the aging demographic, funding for our institutions, but some of them, like climate change, are things that are outside of our direct control, although we have in Ontario stepped up and we are doing what we can. But those are things that create pressures in our society, and you're not immune to those. That anxiety and that feeling of uncertainty is part of the environment that you work in. So we know that we need to step up and address the concerns that we can address. So starting this year, we're boosting funding for hospitals by 4.6%. That's $822 million to reduce wait times, address capacity issues, and provide better care closer to home. And we're making the single biggest investment in mental health care in Canadian history, and that's $2.1 billion over 4 years. It is a huge investment and hugely important. And that includes dedicated funding for Indigenous youth to receive culturally appropriate services. This is about opening more doors to care when and where people need it. It's about better coordination of that care once the door is open, having the people who can help people in the public to navigate that system. And we are very grateful for the role that registered nurses play and will play in a strong integrated mental health care system. And I think it's safe to say that as a society, we have, for a number of decades, not paid the attention to mental health that it has warranted. And now we have more awareness, and that's a good thing. But that also means that we are playing catch up in terms of addressing the needs of people in our society. So that's what that investment is about. Thank you. All of you, and probably you better than most people in our society, know the pressures that families are under right now. The economy is growing, but it's changing very fast, and growth isn't being shared equally. As long as I'm Premier of this province, we will deal directly with the challenges that families are facing. And we'll do that by investing in care, not by cutting services. Government has to create the conditions where people can care for their families and have real opportunities to get ahead. Again, from my perspective, that's what government exists to do, is to put those conditions in place. So that's why we have made 4,400 prescription drugs free for everyone from the day that they're born until they turn 25 under OHIP Plus. And we're expanding that program to cover everyone 65 years and over next year, so that seniors will not pay a deductible, will not pay a copay, and that will save seniors an average of $240 a year. And what that will mean is that about 47% of the population in Ontario will be covered by a pharmacare plan. Almost half of people will be covered by OHIP Plus. But I know that that's not the end. You know, we have to keep going, and I'm going to be leaving for Halifax just after we have our conversation. I'm going to the Liberal Federal Convention today, and in my remarks there, I will be calling on Liberals from all over the country to work together to drive the change that we need to have a national pharmacare plan. And people asked me when Eric Hoskins was stolen from us by the federal government. Helena Jasic is wonderful, but we didn't know Eric was going to be going. And when that happened, people said to me, well, you know, that's a bad thing for you, and, you know, what does this mean for you? And what I said was, what it means is that the strongest advocate for a national pharmacare plan is now at the federal government organizing and creating that plan nationally. I think it was the best news that came out of the federal budget. So, as I did with an enhanced Canada Pension Plan, I am going to continue to advocate for that national pharmacare plan, but I'm not going to stop moving Ontario forward, because that's the way we will get that national pharmacare plan, is to have the biggest province in the country advocating for it and making it happen. And it's only right that as other provinces and other constituents across this country look and say, well, why should it happen in Ontario and nowhere else? That's how we will get national pharmacare. So I will be working with you on that. So we're also introducing a new program, because we know that there are still people who are not covered, so we're introducing a new program to help families cover some of the costs of dental care and prescription drugs if they aren't covered by OHIP Plus or a workplace plan. You know, there are gaps in Medicare, we know that, and two of the gaps that we want to work to fill are the dental care and full universal pharmacare. So that's why we're moving ahead with that plan. We also saw that too many bright young students were struggling to afford post-secondary education. Kids from affluent families were going to university or college at 4 times the rate of kids from less affluent families. That meant that we we were missing out on a whole segment of the population who weren't taking on college or university or a skilled trade because they felt that they couldn't afford to do that. And so that's why we made tuition free, and this year more than 235,000 students are at college or university not paying tuition because of that change in our policy. If you've got the grades, you get to go. The cost of living's rising. Work's becoming more precarious. A minimum wage of $11.40 an hour was not good enough, and so that's why in January we boosted the minimum wage to $14 an hour. And we'll increase it to $15 an hour next year. Most of the 1.2 million people who've already benefited from this raise are women. You and I know that. That's the group of people who are benefiting the most. So I want to just say a few more words about the gender wage gap, which is another area where government must play a very active role. We know that one of the biggest reasons that we have such a stark, stubborn wage gap is that childcare is out of reach for many families. Now, we've made a lot of progress in Ontario. You know, we have built more spaces. We're in the process of building 100,000 spaces. When I was the Minister of Education, we moved to put in place full-day kindergarten, which is now in place, and it is a wonderful start for kids, but it is also a huge savings for families. Once a child turns 4, that's $6,000 a year per child that families save because full-day kindergarten exists. So we know that we have to take the next steps, and we have made a commitment that we're going to make licensed childcare absolutely free for preschoolers from 2.5 years until they are ready for full-day kindergarten. It is unacceptable to me that in 2018, moms would not have the choice and that women would be held back, and it is women who are held back by not having the choice to be able to find affordable childcare. So in this time of rapid change, we're being tested as a society in new and different ways. And I believe that we in Ontario can emerge as a stronger province. I believe that to my core. And I have traveled all over the world with trade missions. I have seen so many emerging economies. I have seen challenges that countries like India and China and Vietnam are confronting right now. In Ontario, we have all the conditions for success. And that means that we can work together to make sure that our people can be at their best, and our people are our advantage. But we can only do that if we invest in the care and in the opportunity that they need. So all those things I talked about, a decent wage, education, we've got more to do on housing, but we now have a national housing strategy. All of those things are the things that will fuel our economy. They're not always the things that we talk about when we talk about an economy. You and I know that often the economy is talked about in terms of balance sheets. But the economy goes way beyond that. The economy is the environment, it is the conditions within which people are living. So when I talk about the economy, I'm talking about an economy that includes everyone and allows everyone to take part. But that vision and optimism about the province is not the only vision that is out there right now. And I think you and I know that. It's a highly political moment. I know that we're in the run-up to an election campaign, and you know that too, and you know that there's a different worldview out there. Doug Ford is talking about running government like a business. He's talking about finding $10 billion worth of efficiencies. I can tell you, I got into provincial politics because of another Conservative government that had talked about efficiencies, and what that meant was cuts. It meant cuts to healthcare, it meant cuts to education, and I would not be standing here but for that government that did not respect the public institutions that had been built in this province. And we have another leader, a Conservative leader, who is saying exactly the same thing. So I just want us to be crystal clear that when Doug Ford talks about efficiencies, and he talks about $10 billion, and he goes to municipalities, as he did in Cornwall this week, and he says to them, we'll continue to invest in infrastructure if you find efficiencies and cut your budgets. What he means is cutting across government provincially and cutting across government municipally. We can't afford that. We can't have that vision that I talked about, that having everyone at their best if that's the road that we go down. So, just this week, he made another promise to cut corporate income tax for wealthy business owners. That commitment will cost about $1.3 billion annually. That's $1.3 billion that will not be available to invest in healthcare and education. And that is the equivalent of about 12,000 nurses, just to put it in context in this room. So, we get nurses or a tax break for big business. That's the choice that we're going to be confronting in this election. What I hear from people is that they expect government to be there to help families to ease the burdens that they're facing and to make life more affordable and more fair for everyone. That's what I hear people saying to me. Now, he's going to promise that he can do both, and I'm here to tell you it's not possible. You either have to make these investments or you don't. You either believe that it's worth investing in people or you don't. And so the reason I go to work every day is to make sure that we have a province where everyone has the support that they need, because I believe that that's what we're capable of. I believe that that is the mandate that our society gives to government. So I look forward to working with you over the next number of weeks and years. I am so grateful for your partnership. Thank you so very much. Merci. Miigwech. So we're going to do some questions.
Doris is going to come up and do this part of it. So we're going to do questions. Did you? No.
Okay.
In a minute.
Okay.
Or do you want the questions first?
Let's do the questions.
Very good. So don't open.
Okay. So I'm happy to take a few questions. You know I'm not a technical health expert, so if I'm better on the political questions, but if you've got a technical question, I'll do my very best.
Margarita Salvatore, Region 6. This province, let me start off by saying that healthcare is so important and whatnot. However, when we think about debt to Ontario, your government started this debt at $138 billion. It's now reached to $325 billion. We're paying $1 billion per month for the interest, not the principal. And at this rate, it's gone up so much that the Moody report has brought it from stable Ontario to a negative. That in itself is quite concerning, because not only will, yes, we want to do for healthcare, education for everyone. However, in the future,
The question, please.
So how are we going to do things in the future to be financially responsible? Because if you think about this province is in the negative, how are we going to get out of this?
I hear that question, and I appreciate it. So just to be clear, a significant portion of that debt that you're talking about is actually borrowing that we have done in order to build infrastructure. When you look at the actual amount that is accumulated deficit, so in other words, when we haven't brought in as much money as we have invested in people, it's a fraction of that. It's a much smaller amount. So we made a decision. I am going to be the first to say that we made a very concerted decision to invest in infrastructure. I was the Minister of Transportation. Carol named that list of ministries. I traveled this province in 2010, and I'm telling you that our roads, our bridges, our transit investments for decades had not been what they should be, and that's why we've invested in infrastructure. So a big part of that debt is that. The other thing to recognize is that we worked very hard coming out of the economic downturn to balance the budget. We did that this year. The budget is balanced. We have a surplus of about $600 million, and that is no mean feat. If you look at the last 40 years in Ontario, the budget has been balanced. Do you want to guess how many times? 8 times. 5 times by Liberals, 3 times by Conservatives. So the reality is that we have a very, very important set of needs right now that need to be invested in. We're watching our debt to GDP, which is really the number that is important. And Ontario, I know that the Tories in particular want to talk about, the subnational debt. The fact is that Ontario is bigger than most states, it's bigger than many countries, and our GDP is bigger than that of many countries around the world. And when I travel to the United States and I look at the GDP of states in the United States, we outstrip the vast majority of them. So we're going to be very, very careful with all of the dollars that people entrust with us, but we are going to invest in people. That's the decision that we made in this budget.
Thank you. I would ask, excuse me, Premier, I would ask that given the time, and I know the time constraints on the Premier, that you ask, first of all, we'll address those currently at the mic, please, and I ask that you move to your question very quickly to respect the Premier's time and each of you at the microphone.
So should we go to 3?
We're going to go to this microphone, number 3.
Yeah.
Hello, Premier. My name is Burton Mohan. I am a York University nursing student. We are entering the 7th week of the strike. Unfortunately, what this means for us is most of us are going to graduate late. I understand that the province has taken some action now by appointing some sort of industrial commission, which is going to come back with answers in 3 weeks. That means that the strike will be entering week 10 by the time this happens, and that will likely not occur with the end of the strike. Unfortunately, what this means is, I'll move to my question really quickly.
Question, please.
Yep. This means that if the strike does not end in 11 days, nursing students will not graduate on time. That's 1,100 nursing students at York University will graduate late. Imagine what this means for patient care.
So you want to
when
know
are
what
you going
we're
to take action and end the strike?
Thank you.
So let me just, and I am very worried about this, which is why the commissioner has been appointed. I've asked if we can move that report up, whether it has to be that whole time, because I think if there is an answer that we can get sooner, we need that. And secondly, I have repeatedly asked the administration at York to ensure to us that they have a plan for students to be able to graduate and graduate on time. I know that people are looking at summer jobs. I know that those time constraints are very, very important to students. And so I am on a daily basis asking for us to find a way to expedite this process. So I just want you to know that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Microphone 4, question, please.
Elizabeth Jensen from London. I'm a clinical nurse specialist in mental health, a faculty member at York, and a researcher in mental health. A couple of years ago, I evaluated a garden project at Canvoice, and people signed up because they knew they would get the food from the garden to take home. We held a focus group to find out how are you juggling rent and food? And I got an earful about the cost of medication.
Question, please. Question.
OW and ODSP are not back at the rates they were before the last notorious Harris Conservative government. Is there a plan, first of all, bearing in mind inflation has happened over the years, is there a plan in place to help people who are disabled have enough money so that they can cover food and rent and get vegetables and get fruit, things many of us take for granted, essential for health? Is there a plan to perhaps cover their medication so they're not having to choose?
Thank you.
So, so you're talking about medication that other than what's covered by
psychiatric medication.
Okay.
Depending on which disability plan they're on, it's not covered.
Not covered. Okay. So in our budget, we have significant increases to ODSP and OW. I know that it remains a concern. We also are making a change in terms of the flat rate, because there are people who are homeless who are getting much less than people who are not, which does not make any sense to me. So we're leveling that. And we are, we are continuing to look for ways to help people. I mean, poverty reduction, when I talked about the minimum wage, when I talked about the some of the changes in social services. So, for example, the assets that people can own, the amount that they can earn before they have money clawed back, we are following through on those changes, which will ease the burden on people both on OW and ODSP.
Thank you very much. Now, Premier, I don't know, how is your time?
Are you going to take me?
I think I'm okay.
Are you okay? I have to ask you, though, because we also have an agenda. We can take, after this, one more person, and then I'm sorry, we will have to ask that you, and we'll take mic 3, we'll take mic 4, and 1 at mic 4, and then I'm sorry, that will be it. Thank you. Mic 2.
Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. And I just want to give you a perspective. I'm a registered nurse, but I work in the social service sector, specifically in the developmental services. And I do want to thank you for actually what you've done in our sector for this past many years, and I think that has to be applauded, starting from the ODSP and services for those with developmental disabilities through OASIS. So that needs to be said. That
and you know that there is a serious new injection of funding into developmental services in our budget.
Yes, thank you. So I need to say that because it's not all doom and gloom. And the second one is actually, if you can actually, because you will win.
Sorry. We need your question,
I have to finish this. She needs to look at the determinants of health and maybe look more in a proactive way through public health.
Your question. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to microphone 1 at microphone 3, 1 more at microphone 4, and then we will have to close the questions. Thank you. Microphone 3.
Thank you. My name is Wynne. I'm a nurse in correctional setting. So I want to thank you for creating the Correctional Health Secretariat to look in terms of transferring healthcare. However,
we want that to happen.
We know that
you did.
Question,
Doris is just saying she pushed for that. That too. You did.
I was behind there.
Your question, please, sir.
So we are anxious in terms of timelines because we are well aware of the fact that a patient is a patient irrespective of where they are. So when are we going to see our patients in a correctional setting have access to the same resources as other patients in the community?
Yeah, so I'm looking to Ali. I want us to move on this as quickly as we can. I can't promise you that it will happen before June 7th, but it is certainly our intention to move as quickly as we can to make that happen. I believe that it's the right thing to do, which is why we've started down this path. And when people say to me, but what if you don't get elected? My response is, you actually have some control over that. So we're going to do our very best to make that happen. Okay.
Thank you. Final question, the gentleman at microphone 4.
My name is Aaron Clark. I'm the chair of the Mental Health Nurses Interest Group.
Hi, Aaron.
I've been very fortunate in my career to work with a lot of marginalized individuals. My question is around housing. And when I say housing, I don't just mean a roof, I mean a home. There's lots of people living out there who are homeless. I've seen lots of people suffering from frostbite, things like that. What is our housing strategy? And what are we doing to house people, but also to support people to maintain that housing?
So I just want to talk about that in 3 parts quickly. We have, as I said, we are working with the federal government on the national housing strategy, and so there will be more housing built. But as we build supportive housing and a continuum of housing care for seniors, that is also, I would suggest to you, part of our housing strategy. And the third thing is that as we build more housing for people with mental health issues, that is also part of our housing strategy. So I think it's important that we not make silos out of these things, that they are integrated. And so when I talk about housing, I talk about it across government in that way. And we're working on all of those. End of discussion.